He was only 23. Hossam Shabat was a Palestinian journalist, a courageous journalist, an inspiring journalist who covered Israel's genocide against the Palestinian people whilst working for Al Jazeera. Yesterday, he was assassinated by the Israeli army in a targeted attack on his car in northern Gaza. Just an hour before, he had reported the killing of Mohammed Mansour, a fellow journalist at Palestine Today. His last assignment was reporting on Israel's slaughter of a colleague just before he was to suffer the same fate. He was only 23. More than 200 Palestinian journalists had already been killed by the Israeli state before Hossam Shabat. This is the biggest massacre of journalists in human history. Hossam Shabat was someone who did his job in impossible, apocalyptic conditions, with courage, commitment, clarity, and persistence. We learned so much about the depravity of Israel's genocide from his work. Dropsite News published his last ever piece, written before he died, headlined "Report from the Front Line of Israel's War of Annihilation." Let me read one paragraph so we can bear witness through Hossam Shabat's work. In the first 6 days of this renewed military operation, northern Gaza witnessed 4 bloody massacres. The most notable was the Mubarak family massacre, which took place as a family were gathering in mourning to offer their condolences to Dr. Salim Mubarak. In an instant, their collective grieving was turned into a sea of blood and body parts. The entire family was killed. Dr. Salim, his wife, his children, his parents, no one survived. One eyewitness summed it up plainly: they were all killed. The victims were not on a battlefield, but in a house of mourning. It was a crime in every sense of the word. Let me read another paragraph. When I arrived on the scene, I wasn't ready for the horror before my eyes. The streets were filled with the dead. Under every stone lay a martyr. Dozens were crying for help from underneath the rubble of their homes, but there was no one to respond. Screams filled the air while everyone stood helpless. My tears didn't stop. The scenes were more than any human being could bear. The ambulances were filled with corpses, their bodies and limbs piled on top and entwined with one another. We could no longer distinguish between children and men, between the injured and the dead. He was only 23, and yet Hossam Shabat achieved far more and changed so many more people than the vast majority ever achieve in far greater lifespans. And that's why the Israeli state killed him. They had repeatedly threatened him and bombed his home, as he recounted.
وأنا أجري المكالمة مع ضابط الاحتلال واستمرت ما يقارب 6 دقائق. جعل أمامي خيارين: إما أن تترك مدينة بيت حانون وتترك العمل الصحفي، وإما سيتم قصف منزله. وعندما رفضت الخروج من مدينة بيت حانون قال لي: الآن ستسمع صوت الانفجار. وأمام عيني قد رأيت المنزل يسقط في ثواني.
Last year, the IDF smeared 6 journalists as Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists, using the sort of confected evidence they're notorious for. A classic example, incidentally, of every accusation is a confession, given the number of Israeli journalists who are IDF reservists. One of the Palestinian journalists smeared by Israel was Hossam Shabat. As I wrote at the time, these are 6 of the last surviving leading Palestinian journalists in Gaza. Israel has just placed a target on their backs with no evidence. Now, Israel seeks to exterminate some of the only remaining eyes the world has to see the war crimes committed in Gaza. That's why they killed him, because he offered the world his eyes to see Israel's war crimes. He was only 23, but he was loved not least by his own people. This interaction with a little girl in Gaza encapsulated that love.
شو ليش ما فات الجودة على الشمال؟ كنا نعيط عليك والله هالدرجة بتنام بايش؟ لا اله الا الله والله نزعني قسما بالله العلي العظيم نزعني. اشتقتي لنا يعني؟ والله اشتقتي لنا. جدعة ايش بدك تصيري لما تكبري؟ صحفية. بقول كيف بدي اصير صحفية واسم شمالته يستشهد. كيف بدي اصير صحفية؟ لا ليش نستشهد؟ لا يبعد الشر عنك. كيف بدي اصير صحفية سعيدة؟ لا بنسويك صحفية. بدك صحفية تصيري؟ ان شاء الله. نصير صحفية. يلا سلام. يلا سلام.
Last month, he was reunited with his mother for the first time in 492 days. Less than 6 weeks later, she was mourning his slaughter at the hands of the Israeli army. He was only 23, and yet tens of thousands of Israel's victims were younger than him. And he fearlessly covered a genocide which has slaughtered so many Palestinian children. So many of his also young colleagues were butchered as well, like Ismail Al-Ghul, another Al Jazeera journalist, and Hassan Hamad. Last October, with both killed, he posted a picture of him beside them both with his infectious smile. And the caption, "I promise you guys, I'm still carrying the torch. Rest in peace, my beloved Ismail and Hassan." He was only 23, but he had wisdom way beyond his years, wisdom many people never gain. That wisdom defined his last message, penned so it could be released in the event of his murder. And this is what he said. "If you're reading this, it means I have been killed, most likely targeted, by the Israeli occupation forces. When this all began, I was only 21 years old, a college student with dreams like anyone else. For the past 18 months, I've dedicated every moment of my life to my people. I documented the horrors in northern Gaza minute by minute, determined to show the world the truth they tried to bury. I slept on pavements and schools in tents anywhere I could. Each day was a battle for survival. I endured hunger for months, yet I never left my people's side. By God, I fulfilled my duty as a journalist. I risked everything to report the truth, and now I am finally at rest, something I haven't known in the past 18 months. I did all this because I believe in the Palestinian cause. I believe this land is ours, and it has been the highest honour of my life to die defending it and serving its people. I ask you now, do not stop speaking about Gaza. Do not let the world look away. Keep fighting, keep telling our stories until Palestine is free." The least we owe to Hossam Shabat, the least we owe to the countless Palestinians murdered by Israel's industrialized killing machine, is to keep speaking about Gaza, is to not look away, and is to keep fighting. Those of us in nations such as the US, Britain, Germany have special responsibilities. Our states have played pivotal roles in this genocide, as they have played pivotal roles in the oppression of the Palestinian people. Indeed, our states have helped to murder Hossam Shabat and countless other Palestinians like him as well. Hossam Shabat had to speak the truth whilst living in an apocalyptic landscape, deprived of food and the essentials of life, constantly under bombardment. A tiny strip of land no bigger than East London, being bombed and bombed and bombed again. His friends, colleagues, loved ones killed, constantly fearing for his life, knowing that every moment could be his last, until it was. He was only 23, but it's up to us to ensure that his legacy lives on for the generations to come. And that must mean not just ending this genocide, but the abomination that is Israel's Western-facilitated subjugation of the Palestinian people. And one final thing. Most Western media outlets have had nothing to say about Hossam Shabat and his killing, or his colleague Mohammed Mansour, also killed by Israel yesterday, just as they've had nothing to say about the biggest slaughter of journalists in history. Imagine watching your colleagues exterminated in an unprecedented murderous frenzy as they report the truth of what is being facilitated by your own government and saying nothing at all, not a single word about their fate, nothing of any meaning or substance. Well, to my colleagues, with those courageous exceptions, you disgust me. Shame on you, and shame on you forever. You'll never be forgiven. This will haunt you for the rest of your life, and we will hold you to account as well. You see, these are real journalists in Palestine who have risked everything, who have paid the ultimate price to let the world know the truth about one of the great horrors of our age. And most Western journalists have freely chosen, to be complicit in that crime. History will damn them for it, and they will, in time, be held accountable for what they have done. So let's honour the memory of Hossam Shabat and take his courage, his clarity, his determination, and keep speaking up and keep fighting until Palestine is free.